you should stop it in ways, because it might be so that you learn muscle building on. I know it sounds like opening line of some cliché, clickbait influencer, but the truth is that most of the folks, even the ones greening away for years, are trapped in a surface level understanding of how physiology works, and it all is always run by a complicated mythology. Even in the gyms, there are coaches that are actually train other people who never read the real studies, believing the concepts like muscle confusion or anabolic windows, and trying to understand how their muscles can respond to these arbitrary rep ranges. But what the top one understand that others don't is that muscle growth operates on mechanistic principles that don't care about these gym traditions, and your muscles are simply meant to respond to mechanistic stimuli like mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and progressive overload. So let's split this out and understand how this all works. So let's start from the basics. What actually is building muscles? A fitness muscle growth operates basically through three primary mechanisms that work in concert, like a biochemical orchestra. So first is the mechanical tension. It basically represents the physical stress placed on your muscle fibers during the contractions. Think of it as a primary conductor. Most studies conclude that 20 to 22 cells is basically enough for the number of heart cells performed to correlate with maximal hypertrophic gain. But there's the second thing you are all aware of, that in your muscles called metabolic stress sensation, but sometimes but about always for some reason are trying to chase this burping in your muscles, defined as metabolic stress. Still, but their studies come to a bit different conclusion. The thing is that the shorter rest periods combined with the lower loads can produce muscle growth through the mechanism like cellular swelling and growth hormone response. And sometimes show that up to 35% of muscle thickness increases immediately after the workouts. But what's actually crucial is that this type of stress can work only with the mechanical tension in mind, because if you're just chasing the fin, you can chase it even without any dumbbells or barbells, just squeezing your muscles as such. So it won't produce any reward for you, and it won't produce any gain. So think about it mindfully. The third mechanism is the muscle damage, and it was widely misunderstood over the decades. This damage eventually occurs after any training session, but some people are seeking for it deliberately through excessive exercise training or just chasing the spin of burn. Curiously, there are studies show that both high-intensity and centric-focused methods were all quite a bit by the videos of guys like Jeff Lampard or Mike Zerato, but the traditional training produce approximately similar results over time. So the damage here is more of a byproduct, but not the goal. So there go the same principles. The mechanical stress with the number of tension put on the muscles and the volume you're working with, but the repetitive process are optimal. Remember, the second is damage that is coming after every training session, but sometimes you can deliberately aim the target muscle with a slower eccentric mode just to make it feel the burn and feel a better byproduct from time to time. But over the larger period of time, we would rather use it as instrument, but as a main way to target your muscles. And basically, muscle damage we mentioned. So, and what keeps them all together is the main principle, the progressive overload. But research shows that it doesn't mean just simply putting more weight every single workout, but rather through increasing volume and improving range of motion, or even it has a time under tension. So here, your muscles are adapting and growing bigger because of this systematic approach. And this is kind of a predictable physiological pathway. We used traditional bodybuilding splits like chest and triceps, back and biceps, back and shoulders, and so on. And they might feel satisfying, but sometimes there are even gains on the table. The meta-analytic data reveals that training frequency shows minimal differences for hypertrophy and volume is equated. Training muscles from 1 to even 6 times per week produces similar results, but not for all muscle groups. The nuance that matters is when session volume exceeds from 12 to 15 sets, splitting the volume across multiple sessions becomes superior. And curious muscle groups are simply recovered longer, for example, back or chest. The sweet spot is from 2 to 3 training sessions per muscle weekly. This frequency allows you the optimal protein synthesis stimulation without excessive fatigue. Protein synthesis is mainly aimed at recovering your muscles and skeletal system, and it remains elevated for 48-72 hours after your workout. So we should plan our workouts into approximately this time to train 2 days interval or 3 days interval, but this range can differ depending on your level of readiness and experience. So for beginners, it's from 10 to 14 sets per muscle group per week. For intermediate lifters, from 16 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, and for advanced bodybuilders or lifters, it's from 20 to 25 sets per muscle per week. But you should avoid the very important thing, the muscle failure bias. Almost all the newbies think that the target goal of their workout should be to finish with the rep that was almost impossible to make, but you broke through. That's a good intention and everyone can appreciate it, but it makes you fatigue excessively. And almost all studies demonstrated 2 to 3 sets to failure is more than enough for the maximal hypertrophic stimulus. Now, let us proceed to one of the main debates in the field, the battle between compound and isolated exercises. But both of them are basically serving the main purpose in a well-designed program. Heavy compound holds like squats, deadlifts, or presses all for greater absolute load and a better hormonal response. Studies show that such compound movements can activate target muscle as effectively as acceleration, while recruiting additional stabilizers and synergics, but they just fatigue you a bit more. But stay careful, it doesn't mean you should put all 3 movements in every workout or train them excessively. But for isolated exercises, one of the main benefits is that you can address the regional muscle development, even hit at different zones of one single muscle. For example, leg extension preferentially develop the rectus femoris compared to squats, which target almost all of the quadriceps but can miss the zone a little bit depending on your squat technique. And the bench press targets the chest, but the twice target the upper chest much more effectively than the flat bench press. And if you structure a program with around 50-60% load on compound movements for systematic training and 40-50% of isolation work with targeting specific weaknesses and your aesthetic priorities, it would be the best choice ever. This ratio would optimize both total workout capacity and regional muscle development. We should also mention what sometimes is missed, the range of motion. Research shows that trained muscles through their full length always produce superior hypertrophy compared to partial range movements. Train at longer muscle length appears to provide the better mechanical strength and trigger the protein synthesis response much more than its shorter amplitude. Another important thing to mention is the time you're putting your muscle under stress. Logically, we should suggest that the slower rep would automatically equal the better muscle growth, but the research shows a different story. They showed that in studies that compare different type of protocols with as many as 6+ seconds per rep from 2 to 4 seconds show that 6+ seconds can reduce the total volume, but it just fatigues you more. So from 2 to 4 seconds, it appears more optimal. Curiously and crucially, the total time you spend on retention % matters much more than individual rep speed. The best practical tempo recommendations are from 1 to 2 seconds on concentric phase with the exposure intent and control execution, the 2 to 3 seconds of controlled negative, the eccentric phase, and your total time per rep would be from 3 to 5 seconds this way. And it seems to be an optimal stimulus. By the way, with a good performance on eccentric phase, the negative phase, you can generate from 20 to 60% more force and proves to be a good adaptation for your facial health and length. But pay attention, the excessive eccentric impulses can lead to a bit disproportional muscle damage, so your muscle damage a bit more closer to the tendon and can impair your recovery time and make it a bit bigger. So mind this. Let us go forward. What should we do with the rest intervals and what's the optimal recovery performance balance? The rest period recommendations are actually split between the cardinal bodybuilding 60-90 seconds protocols to powerlifting 3 to 5 minute recoveries. But science suggests a more nuanced approach. In your hypertrophy-based training, if you rate between 90 to 180 seconds, it helps to optimize the balance between the metabolic stress your muscles undergo and the volume maintenance. Meanwhile, with the longer rest period, like 3+ minutes, it allows the better strength and volume preservation, but may reduce the metabolic stress contributions, so it's as good for hypertrophy as it might appear. And while 60-90 seconds is a shorter period, but it maximizes the metabolic stress. However, compromising the total train volume due to incomplete ATP synthesis. To sum this all up, in compound exercises, it's prominent to rest from 2 to 4 minutes, but for isolation, stay between 90 and 150 seconds. That's good for you. It balances the volume and metabolic stress. If you're maxing out or working over 80% of your 1 rep max, the optimal rest is from 3 to 5 minutes, but on average moderate intensity volume work, it's 2 or 3 minutes max. Another important principle we should proceed to is the mind-muscle connection, because the AMG studies show that internal focus cues, so like focusing on target muscle, visualizing it, can increase muscle activation up to 20-60% compared to the external focus or just specific focus if you don't think about it. There is the research in the field by Schoenfeld showing that two training videos, one of which was significantly aiming at the muscle and visualizing it during the bicep curls, has proceeded to make a much bigger progress in muscle growth after 8 weeks compared to another individual who's simply lifting the weight. Think about the compound exercises way. Actually, if you perform squats or deadlifts, you should focus on more than 6 or 8 muscle groups, and it isn't so effective. But on the other way, if you just simply breathe, so focus on the coordination and stability, it proves to be the best choice. So there we can conclude that for isolation exercises, the visual focus and cueing for target muscle contraction was the best. Meanwhile, for combined exercises, the best is to focus on movement quality and speed and the external cues like stability. For your lagging muscle groups, you try to emphasize the connection during the targeted exercise. And for your follow-up sets, you simply practice these activation patterns before heavy loads. Another principle is fairly simple, but most of the people are simply forgetting about it. It's the sleep, your main recovery. Sleep isn't just rest, it's the only period when your muscle growth happens. Research consistently demonstrates that if you deprive your sleep, it impairs the muscle prosthesis and goes on to promote protein breakdown through altering your hormonal patterns. Research shows that even reducing sleep from 1 to 2 hours per night can significantly impair your strength and muscle development. One thing you probably didn't know is that the growth hormone, well used upon the other PEDs, can reach up to 10x, 20x during sleep compared to the wake period. That's because you promote swellness, but it has protein synthesis and the lower cortisol level. This is the godlike anabolic environment, but if you disrupt this person by sleep deprivation, it simply reduces the anabolic hormone activities and decreases your cortisol. So try to avoid the sleep deprivation. To double click on this, from 7 to 9 hours seems good, but prioritize the sleep consistency. So it doesn't work like sleeping for 9 hours 3 days straight and then reducing it to 6-7 hours. It should be consistent. Don't forget about the fact that it should be a one sleep as well. So 6 hours sleep and 2 hours nap doesn't count as 9 hours sleep. You should create the appropriate environment in your room with cool temperature and dark tones, basically to enhance your deep sleep phase. Research actually suggests that if you pay enough attention to your sleep quality metrics like deep sleep percentage and sleep efficiency, it may prove to be more predictive of your recovery than total sleep time. For example, at least with high sleep quality but slightly lower time, show better results than at least with high sleep time and lower sleep quality. Hope this was helpful. Try to think about it all, but actually it's not all, because there's the next chapter to come. Then I'll tell you about how ego hormones and genetics is impacting the process, the techniques you should need beyond the basics, and how to break your plateau, the methodology of the topic, and how to integrate the soul into your training protocol. So I was trying my best for this video. Hope you like it. There's much more to come, so see you soon.